just going over before you sit your exams next week. So without further ado, I will hand over to Christine, who will take us through today's session.
Hello and welcome to everybody. My name is Christine Harbottle. I'm the Manager for Membership Services. The first slide that you can see there provides instructions as to how we're going to proceed with the webinar. You'll note on there that if you wish to ask a question, then you can type your request to me. I will then read out the request so everybody else can hear and hopefully provide a suitable answer for you. Once the webinar is completed, any requests for further advice can be emailed to AIA at exams@aiaworldwide.com, and then we can respond to you. We're conducting these webinars to provide advice so that hopefully you can pick up some tips before your exams next week, and we intend to continue with the webinars over a period of time. So good luck to everybody in their exams. Starting with the first slide.
Just check if everyone can hear.
Can everybody hear what I'm saying at the moment? If you can just say yes. Yes, they're saying okay. Great. Okay. That's fine. So studying for a professional exam is different to studying for exams if you were, say, sitting a qualification at a university. The AIA syllabus is constructed by the AIA, the way that we present the exam questions and in terms of the scenario type questions and the way we introduce command words, and also how we link that back to our syllabus in terms of the standard of the exams is the way that the AIA conduct a professional qualification. You should aim to complete the exams in line with the exam regulations, and that means that you should attempt all of the exams at every exam session. We have a number of candidates who have previously not sat the exams as required, and it means that you actually don't progress through the exams. So it's really important as you attain the right qualifications with the AIA that you progress through the exams, coupled with attaining the relevant accountancy work experience. So what does that actually mean in terms of work experience? It means 3 years full-time work experience with an approved employer. And you should make sure that you understand what's required in terms of this initial professional development, which we call IPD. So we have professional exams, and we have the requirement for you to complete professional accountancy work experience. Some people are not actually hearing what I'm saying. I'm going to move the mic closer to my face so that we're going to pick up everything, hopefully. Moving on to the next slide now. So an overview of candidate performance in terms of the exams that we held in November. The key points in terms of that performance are really important for you to consider. These points are included in the AIA Exams Advice document, which we have issued on our website to students. If you need this document and another copy of it, I can supply that to you. So an overview of what's happening in terms of the qualification. Some candidates still do not attempt enough of the questions, and this means that you'll fail the paper. This has happened over a number of years, and in the exam advice, I always say make sure you understand what the rubric on the front of the paper requires of you. So it might be that you have to answer a 40-mark case study, for example, at the Professional 2 level, and 3 further questions. You should answer the first question and make an attempt at the 3 remaining questions if that's what's required of the paper. So how do you understand what's required of the paper? You go to the front of the paper and look at the rubric, which is a description of what's required in terms of the questions that you've got to answer. What do we require of a student in terms of passing the exams? Well, you should aim to get a 50 marks in your exams. some students don't actually get 50 marks, and quite often it's because they have not studied enough, they've not applied their knowledge, they haven't answered sufficient questions, and that comes back to the first point about making sure that you do answer the correct number of questions. Some more comments from the November exams. It seems that at the professional 2 level, and some of you might be actually there already, students just don't get enough marks to warrant a pass in the compulsory case study questions. Other candidates are not preparing enough. They're focusing on one question, which might cover part of the syllabus, and then they don't study enough to answer questions from the remaining part of the syllabus. And the other part that I wanted to mention to you is that some candidates still fail to demonstrate appropriate exam technique. For example, planning their answers. Now, it's not only the examiners that are telling the AIA that this doesn't happen. We can see it for ourselves by reviewing the exam scripts, and quite often there aren't any answers in the scripts which we can see they've been planned. So you should make sure that you plan your answers. The other point on this slide is that I want to mention is new legislation. The new legislation rule is that AIA will examine international standards on auditing, international standards on quality, and international financial reporting standards and international accounting standards in line with our 6-month rule. Does everybody know what the 6-month rule is? I'm going to look for some responses here. If you do, just say yes. I'm just pausing for a second while I see if we have some answers on this. I haven't got any answers there. So basically the 6-month rule is defined in the front of the syllabus under the notes section. And that's section 4.4, where we have examinable standards. And basically for all of our syllabuses across the whole of the 16 exam papers, you will see which standards we examine in the different papers. So you need to be familiar with the standards in terms of the 6-month rule. So if it's a new standard and it's just become effective, the examiner will require you to have an understanding of that standard, but it's only after the 6-month period has elapsed that the examiner will require you to have an in-depth knowledge of the standard and what's required. So let me go over that once more. If it's a new standard or it's a change to a standard, the examiner will require you to have an understanding of that. It's only after 6 months that the examiner will require you to have an in-depth knowledge of the standard. Do I have any questions on that point so far? I'm waiting to see any responses on that. Okay. There doesn't seem to be any issue around that. I'm going to move on now. So, preparing for the exams. There are actually 12 things that you need to improve your chances of passing the exams. So what I propose to do is to go through the 12 things, so to give you an understanding of what they actually are. Again, these 12 things are listed in the exam advice document, so you can refer back to them. The first point is to make sure that you show the examiner all of your workings. So if you go through the workings of a question and you get to the end of the question and the final answer is not correct, the examiner can award you marks for part of the answer that's correct. AIA does not undertake negative marking. So that means that you won't have marks taken away from you, but if you give some parts of an answer that are correct, then you will be awarded marks for those parts. So that's really important to make sure you put those down. The second point on our 12 things is to make sure that you answer all of the questions, which we've just mentioned. The third point is time management. Students need to understand that they are required to work out how much time they're going to allocate to each of the questions. This is really important. You've got a 3-hour, 15-minute exam. The first 15 minutes are allocated to reading the question paper. The remaining 3 hours are allocated to answering the questions. So you should work out how much time you're going to allocate to all of the different questions. And I would suggest that you leave a little bit of time at the end, which is good exam practice, to review your answers so that you can slot some final points in or adjust any markings that you've made. The fifth point is good exam technique. You should structure your answers and show the examiner that you are you've thought through your answer and you understand what's being asked of you. One of the points I was going to mention about the law papers in particular, law is about demonstrating your knowledge and understanding of the relevant law. So if you were taking, for example, paper 4, which is based on the English legal system, the examiner wants to know that you are able to demonstrate that you've got a good grasp of the law, that you can apply the law and deal with issues, and that you're able to use relevant authority. So relevant authority is citing the proper case law and also the statutory authority that's required for that question. So you have to demonstrate your knowledge and understanding, your application of the law, and also the examiner is looking for what we would term clarity of expression and also structure in your answer. So what does that mean? It means that you are going to be required to explain your argument with concise points and provide evidence to back up your argument. Now, the last point about clarity of expression is very important across all exam papers. The examiner has to see that you understand what's required and you can develop your argument. You also have to be able to write clearly and legibly so that our examiners can actually read your answer. If it was the case that he can't read your answer, then it's going to be impossible for the examiner to award you any marks. Is that clear so far? Okay, moving on to the rest of the remaining 12 things. Our examiners like to see independent reading. They want to understand that you are able to apply the conditions around the standards. For those who are following our audit route, they want to know that you understand the UK auditing and accounting standards. And also, I think it's a good point if you develop good study skills. And that relates to our point 9 on the 12 things that you should know. And make sure you understand the syllabus and have an understanding of what ethics means. Now, I'm going to touch very quickly on ethics because it's part of our syllabus. Am I speaking too quickly for you at the moment, or is it okay? I'm just looking for some responses. I think it's okay at the moment, right? So professional ethics. What do we understand about that? So everybody's saying it's still okay, right? So the AIA adopted the IFAC Code of Ethics in 2006, and the ethics are prepared by the International Ethics Standards Board, and they have prepared a code of professional ethics for accountants. And this is based on 5 fundamental principles, which all accountants and also students should adhere to. The principles are integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, confidentiality, and professional behaviour. And in terms of what we expect from you, in the syllabus, whilst you won't see ethics specifically mentioned, it is implied throughout the syllabus and it's explicitly examined in some of the papers. And so the examiners want to know that you understand what the code states. And basically the code states that accountants must display integrity. And that means in everything that they do, that you should behave in an honest way in all of your business relationships, in terms of your dealings with external parties, and that you should be objective in that you should not allow any bias or conflict of interest or undue influence of others to override your business judgments. So when you're answering the questions, you do need to understand what the 5 principles are and how you should behave as an accountant. And they will frame the questions in such a way as to require you to demonstrate your understanding of what professional ethics are. And the only way that you're going to do that is by going to the code, and the exam advice document contains a link to the code, and going and working through the code and understanding what's required. Okay, so that's the 11th point on the list. And the 12th point on the list, because I'm turning over my list now, is that you should understand what plagiarism is about. Now, I know that Jonathan, who is sitting with me at the moment, and Jonathan conducts our Achieve course, this is one of the areas that he has had to mention to some of his students. If you're going to cite other people's work or reference the work from elsewhere and use it in your answers, then you need to make sure that you state where it's come from. You can't claim somebody else's work as yours, and you shouldn't be learning off by heart examples from AIA past exam papers and then regurgitating those in your answers as if it was your answer. You must make sure that the work that you create and produce is your own work, and if you use case studies or case law rather, then you should cite that in your answers, especially on the law papers. This is really important. Okay. Still continuing on with this slide now that we have in front of us, and we're talking about learning, which is a skill. The study skills resources and the teaching and learning guide, we've mentioned those many times before. You should refer to those. You should also be using AIA past exam papers as a revision tool. So how can you find out where those papers are? Well, that is really easy. If you go to the AIA study text and you look in the back of the study text, you'll see examples of full exam papers. And also throughout the study text, quite often, our publishers, who are BPP Learning Media, they use the examples of the past exam papers throughout the text so that you should be able to see examples. It's really important that you have an understanding of what a full paper looks like so that you can see the structure of the paper and how we set out our exam questions, so you're familiar with what's going to happen on the actual day of the exam. That's really important that you've looked at it and you understand and you know what to expect. Okay, and then the final bullet point on this particular slide is a point that we've mentioned before. Use your revision time to repeatedly practice the exam questions, so that you should write out your answers over and over again to make sure that you have adopted a good exam technique, you know how to write the answers, and you're able to produce a good, concise answer in the time that you've got available. Okay, so I'm moving on now. Are there any questions? If you want to ask any questions, please type your question to me now. Okay. So I'm moving on to the AIA exam syllabus and reading list. The syllabus is updated every year in October, and it's examined the following May and November. So the syllabus that we have now is the syllabus that you are going to be examined on. And all parts of the syllabus are covered over a 3-year period. And if you look at the topic weightings in the syllabus, you'll see that some topics have a higher topic weighting in terms of the percentage of coverage that you would need to think about. And the only way you're going to understand about what's going to be covered in the syllabus is by going back to the syllabus. So your exams are taking place in May, and the syllabus that you're looking at is therefore the syllabus which is 2015. The AIA study text cover the syllabus. So what we've said to BPP Learning Media is we expect them to make sure that the parts of the syllabus that we have that are being examined from one year to the next, that our study texts actually cover the subjects in the syllabus. So when you go to the study text and when you go on AIA Achieve and look at the ebooks which form part of that course, then they're your first reference point, and you should also read widely. So the reading widely, we refer to the reading list, which is at the end of the syllabus. And sometimes, for example, on paper 10, you would see that there are recommended publications to do with professional journals, articles from other journals, additional books that you should be referencing as well. You won't be able to pass AIA exams by just reading the AIA study text. You should be reading other publications, important journals and publications that are offered around the world, international references, also newspapers, which you can access online. And the final point on this slide is, in terms of the syllabus, there is an interrelationship of the subjects and also the standard of the exams. So what do we mean by that? If you went to the front of the syllabus and you looked at the interrelationship of the papers, you would see that Financial Accounting 1 links into Financial Accounting 2, and then in turn that links into Financial Accounting 3. If you're doing paper 4 law, and I know some people who are linked into us might be doing that, you would know that that provides the foundation to the English legal system and leads into paper 8, company law. It also covers things like employment contracts, which could be examined later on in the professional practice paper, which is paper 15. So many of the papers are linked together, and the lower level papers and the foundation level, if we were to compare the standard of those exams, if you wanted to understand what particular standard we're hoping to achieve in those exams, you would say that they're at the first degree level. So in the first year of maybe a degree in the UK. The professional 1 level exams, the level relates to second and third year of the first degree. And the final level exam papers, we say that those exam papers are pitched at master's level. So in terms of the standard, they're very challenging exam papers. So you can see from the levels that you get papers which are progressively more difficult. So we go from the first level to the second to the final level. There's an interrelationship between the papers, and there's also a balance between application versus knowledge in those papers. So at the first level, we have 50% knowledge and 50% application. At the professional 1 level, we have 75% application and 25% knowledge. And at the final level, we're expecting you to reach 90% application and to apply that knowledge that you've acquired during the first 2 levels, and also to bring in additional experiences, maybe from a working environment that you have picked up along the way in terms of maybe ethical considerations and factors that you think that are relevant to the exams. Okay, so I'm just going to pause for a second. Does anybody have any questions relating to the exam syllabus and the reading list and the relationship that we have in the syllabuses? Okay, moving on to the next slide now. All right, I can see somebody wants to understand more about paper 14. Paper 14 is offered at our professional 2 level. It is a financial management paper. Within that paper there, the examiner is wanting you to read the first case study carefully, which is a 40-mark case study. And the requirements to that paper are contextualized in terms of the case that's presented. So you will see a large case study scenario, and then the requirements will be underneath that in terms of what the examiner is asking for. It isn't the case that you would cover up the scenario in the question and expect to answer those questions. And that's the same for all case study type questions. The clue is if you go back to the scenario, and the examiner is then matching the context of the questions to that scenario. So that's how you look at the case study. Read it carefully. At the final level, it could be the case there might be some irrelevant material there. And that's because when you go out to work and you are working as professional accountants, you are expected to know what is relevant and what is not relevant, and to develop those skills. So it might be the case that there's something in that scenario that you don't need to consider. So you need to know what's right and what's wrong. It's the same for paper 13. Somebody's asking me, is that, what's happening with paper 13, which is the financial accounting 3 paper. That paper has a scenario question. And if you look at that particular question, it's got a 40% case study. Quite often that examiner will ask parts to that question, and the final part to the question will touch on ethics. So this comes back to our previous discussion around understanding what professional ethics are. So certainly for paper 13, he seems to bring in a part of the first case study question on ethics. So my advice to you all would be to make sure you understand what professional ethics are. It could be brought into any exam paper, in fact. Somebody's saying to me, according to past papers, the majority is written answer instead of calculation. And I'm guessing they're talking about paper 14 perhaps on that. Calculations can appear in different questions. So what I would say to you, go to the syllabus and go to the structure of the syllabus, and as part of that we describe what the structure of the exam will be. How many questions and how many parts would be given to calculation versus producing a discursive answer. Okay, so then you'll tell it. I can see that somebody's asking about paper 5 and 6. Paper 5 is our auditing and taxation paper. The first part of that section is relating to audit. That's section A. So you are required to answer, if you're following the statutory audit route, and I can see somebody is on the discussion forum today, you are required to answer the auditing questions for that paper in line with the UK auditing and accounting standards and also the UK ethics standards. And you can see those by going to the Financial Reporting Council website. And again, in the exam advice, we have a link to that website, so that you should make sure you understand what is required there. Paper 6, which is information processing. Again, the structure of that paper is split up into sections. So what I need you to do is to go to the syllabus and understand that you make sure that you understand what's required of the different sections for that paper. I'm going to move on now. The Code of Ethics is mentioned again here, and I think we've already mentioned that it's explicit in some questions, but it's implied throughout the syllabus. And now I'm going to move on to exam papers, being really just going over a mixture of narrative and calculations, so you need to understand what's required. Touching again on time management, do not begin writing your answer straight away. Take a few minutes to plan your answers and work out how much time you need for each answer. And review the command words in the paper to make sure you know how to interpret the active verb. So what are command words? If you need a list of the command words and you know how to answer the questions in line with the command words, if you go to the study text, they're listed in there. They're also included in the exams advice, the teaching and learning guide that we produce, and they're available as part of the advice that we're talking about today. So I'm just going to pick very quickly, just moving to my right here to pick up a list of the command words. For example, they're graded in levels. So the foundation level, there are a specific list of words. And then when we go to professional 1, there are a specific list of words that we use. And for the professional 2, there are a specific list of words. And that means that when you go to the foundation level words, you will see words like explain. And that means that you have to give, make clear and give reasons for your answers. You will see words like advise and calculate, describe, identify, and plan. You will never see in AIA exam papers, whether you're looking at the first level or the second or third levels, the word list, because in professional exam papers, we're not requiring you just to produce lists. we're requiring you, even as part of explain, to provide an answer, present your thoughts, and give some sort of reasoning behind that. You're not just producing a list of facts, because even at the professional one level, we're asking you to back up your answers with specific arguments. So I'm just looking down. Do you all understand what the command words are? So the command words are the words the active verbs that we use in the required part of the question, which give you an instruction of what is required in the answer. So most people are saying to me that they understand what the command words are. Some professional bodies actually include the command words and the definitions at the end of the exam paper. The AIA does not do that, so you're not going to expect to see those at the end of the papers, because our papers are quite lengthy, and some of the papers have tax tables or formulas at the end. So we decided not to include the command words at the end of the exam paper because we thought it might be too confusing. So that means that you need to understand the command words before you enter the exams, and you need to understand what the words are and what the definitions of those words are in terms of how to answer the questions. Okay. If anybody wants to receive the teaching and learning guide after the exam session, the webinar is completed, you can email AIA to request that, or Jonathan will make them available to you. I'm just reading some responses down the side now. Some of you want to receive these command words, so we'll make those available to you. I'm moving on to the next slide now, which is really just explaining again how to use the 15-minute reading period. AIA introduced this for a specific purpose, so that you could take your time to read all of the questions. Quite often, except at the higher level papers, at the professional 2 level, all of the questions are compulsory in most of the foundation and professional 1 papers. So that means that you need to read all of the questions, and the examiner is asking you to attempt all questions if it's required on the syllabus requirements. So you do need to look at the front of the rubric and see if you've got to answer all of the questions. It'll probably be a case study and a number of questions. So you need to plan your answers and how you're going to fit in your responses to all of the questions. Remember to attempt all of the questions required. Don't answer too many questions. Some people do this still. So it means that you're wasting your time answering a question which won't form part of the marks, and you've wasted the time that you've got available for all of the questions. So please remember to answer the right number and attempt all parts to the questions if you can. Somebody's asking me a question here. Are there any specifics on paper 4 law? What I would suggest to you, I don't know what you actually mean on that. You need to make sure that you demonstrate in your answers for law that you've got a knowledge and understanding of the relevant law, and you've got a good grasp of that, and you know how to apply the law. So you're going to have to cite case law and statutory authority, and make sure that you can demonstrate a clear, concise argument. Law is a fairly challenging paper, so you would need to go to the study text and actually look at the cited examples in there and how to answer the questions. So you do need to look at the AIA study text for law and the past exam papers. Okay, so I'm going to move on now. We're talking about exam resources and keeping up to date. Do you read the exam feedback and the advice that we've been talking about? Could you let me know by saying yes or no if you do look at the exam advice? And I'm getting a response to say quite a few people do. We produce this after the exam results have been issued, so that hopefully you can see the feedback from the different examiners and how people have performed in the exams. And we also include some tips on how to do studying and prepare for the next exams. The other point I want to know, do you read the AIA Student Focus and the weekly news that we produce? Jonathan is sitting with me at the moment, and he's very involved in preparing information for those documents. Some people do. And the final point, how many people actually do independent reading? Who's reading different publications, articles, journal, newspapers to keep up to date about what's happening on the global arena? Who's doing any of that? Some people are saying yes. Because I still get in the feedback and the reports that we get from the examiners that not enough students are undertaking independent reading. It's really important. Okay. So that ends our presentation for today. The final review, key factors that I would go over with you in terms of how to perform. I'm just going to pick those up. Make sure that you, plan your answers, that you read the scenario slowly and carefully. Maybe if you're going to do an essay type, a narrative answer, that you plan your answer. You read the question and scenario again. You look at your plan and the number of issues and make sure that you answer in order of those issues. You begin writing your answer and discussing the points in turn. And then you review your answer and see if there's anything that you've missed out. Okay. You need to be aware of the command words. You need to know how much time you've got on your answers. If you're not sure of anything, you can contact AIA Exams at aiaworldwide.com. The exams are being held the week commencing the 18th of May. You should make sure that you arrive at least 30 minutes prior to the exam so that you can be checked off the attendance register and that you can then take your seat. Importantly, mobile phones are not allowed during the exam on your possession. So if you're placing any bags or coats with the invigilator, make sure that your mobile phone switched off and that they're placed in with your possessions, and the invigilator will put those in a part of the exam hall or the room away from your desk. So it's really important that you don't have that mobile phone on your possession when you're doing the exam. The exams are for 3 hours. Once the exam's commenced, you will not be allowed to leave the exam room until the end of the 3-hour period, unless you need to use the toilet, and then you would be escorted by either a female or male invigilator to the toilet, and then you would rejoin the exam. If anything happened during the exam which affected your performance, then AIA has a special consideration policy where we would consider your request, and there is a special form that you would fill in during the exam. But hopefully nothing will happen and your exams will go well. Once the exam has taken place, then we gather in the exam scripts and we conduct the marking, and we then take part in quality assurance exercises to make sure the marking is of the highest standard before we release the results. So the May exams take place the week commencing the 18th of May, and we aim to issue the marks around the 13th, 14th of July, once we've had various committees taking place to make sure the marks are accurate and correct. Okay. Make sure that you understand when you turn up for the exam that the exams take place at different time zones around the world. So, for example, in the United Kingdom, the exams commence at 10 o'clock and finish at 1:15. And around the world, there are different time zones. And you can see the timetable on the AIA website and also on the exam notification form, which I've posted to you a number of weeks ago. Make sure you take that form with you to the exam because that allows you entry into the exams. Okay. And there's one last question at the bottom. I can see that somebody's asked me, how about the international, I'm guessing you mean international auditing standards. Does this form part of the reading? So the auditing standards relate to the auditing papers. So they're papers 5, 7 and 15. So if you're taking any of those papers, the international accounting standards relate to papers within the financial accounting stream, which are papers 1, 11 and 13. but they could also be examined in the auditing papers as well. Somebody else is asking me a question about paper 14. Should the answers 4 out of 5 questions, and will the examiner mark the exam script if I only answer 3 questions due to insufficient time? Well, first of all, you should plan to answer all of the questions in the time that's available. So this is part of your exam strategy and your preparation for the exam. So you practice the questions and work out how many minutes you can give to the questions. If you only have time to answer 3 questions, then the examiner will mark the questions that you have written, and you will be given appropriate marks if the answers are right. If you answer too many questions, as we mentioned before, then one of the answers will not count towards the marks. So you should aim to answer the correct number of questions depending on the paper that you're required to sit. Do we have any other questions that you would like to ask at the end? You can ask any questions now. Okay, that's great. Good luck in your exams. Thank you for taking part. Jonathan just wants to mention a couple of points about AIA Achieve for those students who perhaps haven't registered on our distance learning course, and I'm going to hand over the mic to Jonathan.
Okay, thanks Christine for taking us through today's webinar session. I hope everyone found it useful. I just thought I'd mention, if anyone, I know you're all probably going to be sitting your exams in May, but for the November exam session, if in May you feel you don't do as well as you felt you might have, and you think you want a little bit more support, AIA does have AIA Achieve, which is our distance learning course. You can find out more information about that on our website. I'm sort of part of the team that runs the course for our students. And I think that course will provide you with the extra support that you might need to pass your exam. If you have any questions about AIA Achieve, you can email them to me at achieve@aiaworldwide.com. I should also mention as well that a recording of this webinar that's taken place today will be made available to everyone that attended. So you will be able to watch this session back if you want to go over anything Christine has said today. What I will also do when I email that to you is I will include some of the documents that Christine has mentioned as she's been going through today's session. So things like the student guide, the examiner's guidance for the previous exam session. Documents like that I will attach to the email, so you'll be able to have access to those. That's pretty much all we've got time for today. So thank you for attending, and I wish you the best of luck with your exams in May.